to our series of successful academic career presentations. And today I'm speaking with Professor Nicky Cullum. Hello, Nicky. Would you like to introduce yourself?
So, as you just said, I'm Nicky Cullum. I am the director of the Greater Manchester NIHR funded applied research collaboration. I'm based in the School of Health Sciences at the University of Manchester.
Thanks, Nicky. And the first question I wanted to ask you is, why did you choose a research career?
Well, probably by accident, if I'm honest. So I did a really interesting degree that doesn't exist anymore, but it was a 4.5-year degree that combined a study of a life science, and in my case that was pharmacology because I really liked science at school, and a nursing qualification. So I really enjoyed that. Went to be a nurse, and was enjoying that, but it was in the 1980s when nursing was very short-staffed. It was incredibly stressful, and the department there where I'd done my degree phoned me up and said, would you like to come back and do a PhD? We've got some funding. And that just seemed like a really good way out of a really stressful situation. I wasn't sleeping. I was just, stressed out. So I went back to do a PhD. It had never been in my plan. I don't think I even knew what a PhD was, if I'm honest. So I've been doing research ever since.
So doing a PhD was a stress relieving option for you?
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm not the kind of person who makes a lot of plans and sticks to them. So most of my career has been sort of serendipity and accident. Just kind of live in the moment and see what comes next. And I've not regretted it at all. I think being an academic is fantastic. Every day is, well, I was going to say every day is different. It was before COVID and lockdown, and then every day is exactly the same now. But every day can be different. And the brilliant thing about having a research career is you are constantly learning new things. And I just absolutely love that. And I'm quite a people person. So I like the interaction with people that you get from being part of a research team. But I'm also an introvert, and I like nothing better than sitting at a computer for hours on end, writing things and doing things on my own. Or at least I thought I really liked doing that until life became nothing but sitting in my bedroom, staring at the computer. I'm not so keen now, but...
Completely identify with where you're coming from, Nicky. So you're saying that you had a series of roles that were people offered you opportunities. Can you talk us through your journey through those roles and how one led to the other?
Yeah, so I did a PhD, which was very much lab sciences, but had a clinical sort of end in mind. So it was on diabetic neuropathy. My dad had had diabetes since he was 17, and he had neuropathy, and I was interested in wounds and I was interested in clinical things. So a PhD on diabetic neuropathy was brilliant for me, although it did involve an awful lot of trips to an abattoir to work. I was actually working on pigs' brains and getting the brains out of dead pigs and doing things with the neuronal proteins from the pigs' brains. So there wasn't as much clinical in it as I would have liked. There was some. Anyway, but I did it in a great department, the Department of Pharmacology at the University of Liverpool, that was run by a chap called Sir Alistair Breckenridge, who died last year actually, but was incredibly charismatic and built this department up in Liverpool to be really, really strong. And he was a clinical pharmacologist who was also a physician. And he used to say to me all the time, Nicky, you need to sort nursing research out. You really need to sort nursing research out. So I kind of, thought, really? Okay. So did my PhD, which wasn't nursey at all, really. But by the end of it, realised that clinical research is what I wanted to do, not lab sciences, not biomedical research. So I applied for and got a postdoc at what was the Nursing Practice Research Unit at the University of Surrey, and that was funded by the Department of Health. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was really exciting. It was trying to bring science to bear on nursing issues, nursing challenges like hospital-acquired infection, like wounds, prevention of pressure ulcers, that sort of thing. and decision making as well, clinical decision making in nursing. So, so that took me from what essentially was biomedical science to something a lot more applied and a lot more clinically focused. I had to learn a lot of new things, and I, in fact, had to teach myself what epidemiology was, what clinical trials were, things that I didn't really learn in my PhD. But it was I spent 2 years there on a fixed term contract looking at pressure ulcers. And what I realised was that was going to be my passion. So wound care and pressure ulcers was where I thought I could use my science, the epidemiology I was learning, and my clinical experience to fill some gaps, because we know very little about wound care and what works, and you know, the epidemiology. Mm-hmm. So I left Surrey in 1990, went back to Liverpool for 4 years on a lectureship, teaching pharmacology to nursing students and doing some research, and you know, consolidated, I guess, my research experience, and also came into contact with another charismatic person who really influenced my career, and that was Karen Luca, who ended up being head of nursing at Manchester. So she was at Liverpool at the time, and she was a great mentor to me, and I learned an awful lot from her, and she gave me a lot of really good guidance. And the other person I encountered sort of around those years was a chap called Ian Chalmers, who went on to set up the Cochrane collaboration. And so the reason why I'm name dropping in this indefensible way is really to say that you meet amazing people and you learn as much as you can from them. And it's usually luck as to whether you meet them or not, but we all meet amazing people. You learn what you can from them, and you know, often you can really benefit from what they bring to you, either in terms of connections with other people or research ideas or whatever. So a load of key people that I've encountered that really massively influenced me. As it was, my lectureship in Liverpool, where I met Karen, finished. There was no funding beyond 4 years, and I was about to be unemployed. And I met another amazing person. Well, I met two amazing people, Trevor Sheldon, and he introduced me to Alan Maynard. And they were, and I met Trevor by accident at a meeting at the Department of Health, where we were talking about setting up the Cochrane collaboration, and Trevor was talking about setting up the NHS Centre for Reviews and Dissemination. And this, you know, was all as a response to Ian Chalmers, really. But I told Trevor I was about to be, I'd never met him before, I didn't know him, but he struck me as being, well, incredibly charismatic and very funny and very clever. Mm-hmm. And he sort of chatted to me. I said I was about to be made redundant, and he said, "Oh, you need to come. I need to get you to York. You need to come to York. I'm going to go back. I'm going to talk to Alan Maynard, my boss, and I'm going to see if we can get you a job at York." So, and the thing was, this wasn't nepotism. I'd never met this guy before, but I had learned how to do systematic reviews at a time when very few people, from Ian Chalmers essentially, at a time when very few people were doing systematic reviews. And there was suddenly about to be, in sort of 1994, a huge demand for people who could do systematic reviews. So it was very much the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. I'd learned some skills, and got a 2-year fixed term contract at York to go and do systematic reviews at the beginning of the Centre for Reviews and Dissemination, although I was based in the Centre for Health Economics with Alan. So that, you know, and again, two charismatic, really helpful, brilliant mentors in Trevor and Alan, who then taught me a whole load of other things about health research, applied health research, health economics, questions of clinical and cost effectiveness, those sorts of things that I'd never really encountered in all of my training to that point. And, you know, so I, again, benefited hugely. Stayed at York for 17 years. Eventually got a full-time permanent position. Yeah, so it for me, it was all about meeting the right people at the right time and taking advantage of that in the best possible way, I suppose.
Yeah, and there's a strong theme through that, Nicky, isn't there, around mentorship and mentorship happening just as part of the academy, as a part of the things that we do, and meeting people, which actually I think sometimes lockdown has really challenged that, about how we do that in this virtual environment in a way that because it's so important for senior academics. So you've described a senior academic right back at the beginning of your career at your PhD, who was a clinician and an academic, who saw your potential and encouraged you. And there's a theme all the way through of people, you being open to grab those opportunities, because actually there was no permanent post all the way through. There was a string, and also there was risk attached, because you were saying that at one point you were going to be made redundant, and so there was a sense of being able to cope with the risk, but also grab the opportunities. And networking is a really important and useful skill. That's how I would summarize.
I think that's a really good summary. I think things are almost certainly a lot harder now. Although there's a lot more research, to be fair, there's a lot more research funding around now than there was. This was before NIHR. This was just when the NHS Research and Development Programme was just being set up. So that was all very new. Research for the NHS was a very new idea then, as opposed to biomedical research that was sort of MRC type stuff. So, but you know, it just felt easier for me to be noticed. I think it's maybe harder to be noticed now. I think everyone's a lot busier. I think senior people are a lot busier. But you're absolutely right. I think mentorship is crucial. I do quite a lot of mentorship, formal mentorship as part of different schemes, and I absolutely love it. It's one of my favourite things that I do. I also do informal mentorship, but I think it's so important to help the people behind up the ladder.
So the way that you describe your research career and the journey through is that it was a series of meeting wonderful, charismatic people. It was an extremely happy time, and there were no hurdles at all. And I'm assuming that that's not exactly how it is. Can you describe any particular hurdles and how you overcame them?
Well, the big hurdle for a long time was being on fixed term contracts and not being able to put roots down anywhere, not knowing what your next job was going to be. Because because nursing research was in its infancy, there wasn't really much funding, so I was sort of on my own a lot of the time in terms of trying to generate my own funding, which when I was quite a new postdoc was really, really hard. So the lack of certainty, the impermanence kind of thing was really difficult. Other challenges, well, I guess there were challenges all the way through. I think at the time, apart from when I met Karen, before that I had very little mentorship in nursing. And I think that was very difficult actually, because the other people weren't used to nurses choosing a research career. And those that had chosen an academic career, there was relatively little research going on. And that the research that was going on in nursing was pretty much mainly wholly qualitative. That was most of the nursing research for a very, very long time. And actually there was overt antagonism to quantitative research. And I was a quantitative researcher who wanted to look at clinical trials. I mean, some of the things people said to me, you wouldn't believe now, you know, but the underlying sentiment being, as a caring nurse, you shouldn't even be thinking of counting things and measuring things. And it's, you know, it's all about the patient experience. So that was really hard because I was pretty much on my own, actually, pretty much on my own, and got the support I needed from non-nurses, actually, not from nursing. So at least for a very long time. After the beginning of Cochrane, I came into contact with loads of wonderful people, not many nurses, has to be said, but one of the people I came into contact with was Brian Haynes from McMaster University in Canada, and Dave Sackett, and Andy Oxman, and Peter Tugwell, actually, all from McMaster at one point. And they were brilliant, and they were very supportive of me, said nursing needed this thing, as did Sir Muir Gray from Oxford here, who was, again, a fantastic support to me, saying, yes, of course, nursing needs it. But anyway, the people from McMaster put me in touch with two brilliant nurses who were trying to do evidence-based nursing academically in Canada as I was trying to do it in the UK. They were brilliant. We set up a journal together, evidence-based nursing, along with Brian, run out of the BMJ publications stable. And again, you know, just meeting the right kinds of people and making things happen, seeing an opportunity, realising that just because I'd never met anybody who'd set a journal up before didn't mean to say that we couldn't do it. We went to the BMJ and several other publishers with the idea of, can we do a journal in evidence-based nursing? Will you support us to do that? And in the end, the BMJ and the Royal College of Nursing did it together. So eventually I met nurses who were supportive to what I was trying to do, and we wanted the same things, but I had to look to Canada for that really, rather than, at the time, rather than here. So yeah, so those, you know, those things were really big hurdles, I would say. But then as the NHS Research and Development Programme got momentum, and Cochrane did, and the Centre for Reviews and Dissemination did, and everyone could see the value of having up-to-date reviews, and then if the reviews identify a gap in the knowledge, well, we should do the trial to fill the gap. Things became a lot easier, and actually doing the kind of research that I do became part of the mainstream in nursing, but it wasn't at the time at all. So it's not all been fun.
No. So actually, what you were saying is that there have been times where it's a very lonely journey, and to keep going, what's helped you in that time, how overcoming that loneliness or that isolation, was having champions for nursing outside the nursing profession, and how important that was, but also to look much broader internationally and how our international colleagues can help us connect with that. And hopefully it's a lot better now. I'm wondering if somebody was starting out on their clinical academic career in nursing now, what sort of support or inspiration would you give them? What in terms of the inspirational people that you've met and the support would you want to pass on to the next generation of clinical academic nurses?
Well, I think first of all, I think you need to know what you want, what kind of career you want, what's important to you in your career, and stick to your values in that respect. I think in terms of thinking about the kind of researcher you want to be, I think, well, I can only speak for myself and what I did. I identified the people I thought a lot of, and I've named a lot of them, and I watched them very carefully, listened to them very carefully, and read what they'd written. And I suppose tried to emulate the things in them that I valued. Now, that's not to say I sort of became a kind of copy of any of those people, because the other thing that I think is really important is that you retain your sense of self, your authentic self, and I've definitely done that. I'm certainly not a clone of anybody, but I think I've learned a lot from the people that I admire, and I've tried to. So, for example, I think one of the best writers I've ever encountered in this sort of field is Ian Chalmers. He writes incredibly clearly and carefully, and I recognised that when I was a postdoc and really tried to emulate his style of writing. And when I tried to do that, I think my writing improved massively. Trevor Sheldon, similar in that regard. In terms of saying what you really think out loud and not being afraid to do that, you know, I learned that from Karen Luker, from Trevor Sheldon, definitely from Alan Maynard, and I think that's really important. So, you know, stick to your values, stick to what you think is important, and maintain your standards as far as you can. So I am not one of those people who will strive away to make something perfect, but I do have quite high standards in terms of writing, in terms of presentation, and you know, everything really, meeting conduct, all those sorts of things. Apart from the standards of my own personal behaviour, I kind of let that drop. But you know, professional things, I've got really high standards, and I think you set your own personal standard, and you very much try and stick to it, I think. Be authentic, but I would say I think mentorship is really important. So I would suggest anybody gets themselves a mentor, and that's somebody that it doesn't have to be a formal arrangement, and it doesn't have to be something your employer sorts out for you. That can be somebody you approach as an individual. So, you know, I really benefit from learning from you. How do you feel about being my mentor? You know, maybe we just meet, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a year. And you just, you know, I come to you with the issues I think I would value talking through with you. And, you know, many people would be happy to do that. And then the other thing that I think is important all the way through your professional career, probably whatever you do, is getting key allies to work alongside you. You know, and often they're people who you can mutually support each other. You might work in slightly different areas, deliver slightly different things, but you know, you can do things for each other. And one of my so as an example, one of my key allies now is Cheryl Lenny, who's the chief nurse of Manchester Foundation Trust, as you know. And her life and her work life and my work life are totally different. We're doing different things, but we both need each other. I don't mean need in a kind of desperate sense, but we can both benefit. We do both benefit from each other's input and support. You know, it's really important to me that my research is relevant to the health service before the ARC, and never more so than now during the ARC. I need to do research that health and social care need. And so she is one of the touchstones I have in helping me make sure that happens. But likewise, I know that she needs, you know, those academic links as well, and needs to understand what's going on in the university, and needs to, you know, work with the ARC and things like the ARC. So you know, it's mutually beneficial. And I think, you know, and it doesn't matter what level you are in your career, you can find key allies who are, you know, you're going to be able to support each other, which is different from mentorship, I think. But you can support each other and you know, share information, be useful, sounding boards, that kind of thing. So they would be some of my top tips, I think.
That's really, really helpful. I love the way that you put up close and front and centre being unapologetically you. That sense of authenticity and really being, and I think that's maybe where mentors can help you figure out who you are and who your values are, and help you do that. But then you differentiate between that and a group of people who you recognize have the same goals as you, maybe in different settings, so that you can both work together and link. I think the phrase you used, thought was really useful, was a touchstone. So having NHS touchstones and touchstones in other countries, and people who you can safely share ideas with and work together, and that you know that you've got their back and they've got yours, in quite an aggressively competitive world that is research. I think those two things are really key, and the differentiate between a mentor will help you and work out your values individually, who you are, the researcher you want to be. That's a key phrase I'm going to steal from you and use in my mentorship. Understanding, that's a really good one. Understanding the researcher you want to be, and then setting standards for that, understanding the values that underpin that, and holding true to that. I think that's a really... I mean,
the other thing that I haven't said, but actually is probably the most important thing of all, is if you go in for an academic career, there are lots of what feel at the time crushing disappointments. And I think it is absolutely essential that you learn very early on not to take those personally. So, you know, I've had, you know, people might look at me and think, well, she's all right, she's had a fantastic career. What has she ever had to worry about? But I've had loads of massive disappointments, whether it's a rejected paper. I think rejected papers, I don't worry too much about those, but because you'll always find a journal to accept a paper, and oftentimes you can really improve on the paper with the feedback from the referees. But They're grants that you really, really, really wanted and get knocked back by a funder. And you might have spent a year or 18 months putting together that grant, painstakingly. And you feel, if you're the chief investigator, you feel personally responsible for letting not just you down, but the whole team of people who've put into that grant application. I think all I can say about the crushing disappointment is, you know, it's never your fault. It's never because of you. It's always a constellation of factors. And there will be situations where that grant has been unjustly criticised and turned down by a funding panel. I think those occasions are probably relatively rare, because those of us who sat on funding panels kind of see the faults of so many applications. But I think the positive to take from it is that learning from the feedback that you get and improving on it the next time. So, but not to take it personally. I mean, you know, you just can't dwell on these things. You've just got to move on to the next thing. So I think I've got quite a thick skin when it comes to that kind of thing. And I didn't always have it, for sure. And I think, you know, you develop it and just try not to hang on to those disappointments. Because oftentimes you didn't, even though you might have loved the idea, the grant would, you know, that got knocked back may well have been a bit of a nightmare. The panel may be right, and something else comes on. You've now got space to do something better. You know, that's a crappy grant that you don't have to deliver on.
And I think that you're right. I think, and it's a fine line, isn't it, between developing such a thick skin that you don't listen to people. But being able to be resilient and sort of be Teflon coated so that actually the criticism doesn't crush you. And that, again, mentors can really help you work out what criticism to listen to in terms of what's going to make your bid stronger, what's going to make you... In a previous research team, we used to have an award for the best rejection of a publication. I got a badge for the one that was most quickly rejected. I had a paper rejected within 4 hours of submission, which personally I think is in decent haste. But you know, at least the journal realised it wasn't for them. It wasn't the right place, and they told me quickly, and I could move on. And but I think that that's a really useful point, especially when you're an early careers researcher. It's very understandable and easy to be quite despondent if you have a series of disappointments, but it's the nature of the work, isn't it? Yeah. So you'll be glad to know this is my final question. If you were going to say a key thing that makes a successful academic career today, what would that be?
Anybody's, not my career, but
not your career, but if you could distill some wisdom that we put into, I don't know, a 10 top tips, what's the key thing?
Well, I would say this, but I do think you have to be a good and rigorous methodologist. Whatever the methodology that you work within is, you need to be bloody good at it. You need to be rigorous, you need to know what the standards are for that methodology, you need to be at the cutting edge of new things, and you need to be good. I think that's the most important thing, because that's how you get a niche, really, because the world's full of mediocre methodologists. But you know, people who are really bloody good at what they do, really know their stuff inside out. I mean, most people either have a methodology or they have a kind of area or topic. I think it's much easier to. I think it's much easier to be really good at particular methods and methodologies, and come at different topics with that, than it is to to just have a topic. Like if I was just researching wounds and that's all I ever did, then you know, I think that's quite limiting. But being a really good methodologist, I think, is really important. Gives you much more flexibility, the ability to explore different things, and makes it less likely your papers are going to be rejected on the grounds of methodology. So, or your grants.
Wonderful line. The world's full of mediocre methodologists. So your key is don't be one of them.
Yeah.
Don't be one of them. And it is, I mean, that really staying focused is understanding the methods you're using is fundamental, because, you know, otherwise people will drive a huge load of problems through that you haven't seen coming, because it's no longer watertight, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. I think there are some things that I think people underestimate the importance of that I think are really crucial. I think it's very hard to be a good researcher if you can't write well and clearly.
Yeah.
And I think, because, you know, that's part and parcel of it, isn't it? You can't really be one without that. And I think also the ability to think clearly, see the wood for the trees. That is a skill you can learn to an extent, but you definitely need an innate ability to do that, I think. Focus on things that matter, be clear about those, and be able to communicate them clearly, I think. And that comes with the whole writing thing as well. I mean, those attributes and skills are important in lots of walks of life, I think. But I think they are essential for being a good researcher. But then those coupled with being a brilliant methodologist will make sure that you are never out of work.
No, so and fundamentally, that's what makes a good academic, is the ability to think clearly, but if you just think clearly and don't communicate it to anybody else, then you're not an academic, are you? It's translating those thoughts into a clear argument that is clearly communicated to other people, so you can influence that field. And certainly somebody who's tried to do that and failed on many accounts to be really clear about writing, that skill shouldn't be underestimated. That ability to write clearly and to clearly communicate your ideas is a key one.
Yeah, because it's not just about the research ideas, it's about why this topic is even important in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I think that's a really good point to end this. Is there anything else that you think that I should have asked you, that you're surprised I haven't asked you around clinical academic careers?
No, I mean, I don't know whether this particular interview is aimed solely at nurses and midwives, or nurses, midwives and NHPs, but I would say for any clinical researcher out there, whatever their health professional discipline, I would say don't think too narrowly, from a too narrow discipline specific way. I think the research questions that I've pursued in my career, yeah, I came across the questions because I was a nurse originally. I'm still a nurse and I'm proud of being a nurse, but I don't think I pursued them in a particularly nursey way. I've tried to think broader than that. I've tried to think, okay, for example, a patient with a particular condition, they're going to come across a whole host of health professionals and people who aren't health professionals. What are the questions that are most important to them? They're not necessarily things that nurses do. If there's not much other research going on in that field, then I think it's our responsibility, irrespective of whether we're a physio, a nurse, a pharmacist, or whatever, to do the most important research in that field. Not to get too stuck in a professionally specific, focused niche.
Yeah, and that sense of just ploughing a nursing furrow rather than thinking, actually, this is our contribution to health services research and health research, and we bring a unique contribution because we come from our professional discipline and we understand it, but we've got a duty to apply that to the broad problems of patients and the public from a health perspective.
It's health, and anyway, we all need to do research with other disciplines anyway, so yeah, I think that's it. I'm exhausted now.
Well, it's been lovely. I've really enjoyed I've learned a little bit more about you, Nicky, and I've very much enjoyed this opportunity to talk through your clinical academic career. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle. I've really enjoyed it as well. Thank you.